All right, we are live. It is 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Friday, February the 4th, 2022. This is episode 70 of the program. I can't believe that 70 episodes have happened thus far. Welcome, everyone. It is so nice to be here. So nice to be chatting with today's guest, Mr. Terry Silverlight. Before I bring him on, and we have a special treat for you. But before we bring him on, I'm going to talk about just a few of the artists that Terry has played with. So here, the list is huge. I went on to his Wikipedia today, his own website, and GretschDrums.com, as well as Gretsch.com, and the information is unbelievable. Terry has played with such artists as Billy Ocean, George Benson, Natalie Merchant, Freddie Jackson, Stephanie Mills, Tom Jones, Laura Nyro, Anne Murray, Mel Torme, Jennifer Holliday, Phil Woods, Roberta Flack. He is a songwriter, composer, drummer, educator, author, and he has his latest release is called In My Own Silver Light. And I am so extremely grateful for Terry to be joining us today. And we are going to start with Terry playing a little bit of a drum solo and then a track. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Mr. Terry Silverlight. Woo! Wow. That was awesome. Our first guest in 70 guests to, well, Paul DeLong, actually our very first guest. He played some drums, but we weren't able to set it up with the interface and things like that. And I didn't have this platform either. Didn't have StreamYard. We just had Instagram, but that was amazing, and I can't wait to chat with Terry about that. What do you think, everybody? What a cool drum solo and cool tune. Welcome, Mr. Terry Silverlight. Thank you for making time for us today. That was awesome.
Oh man, Neil, it is so nice to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity to express my appreciation for you and for Gretsch, and it's a real honor. So thanks a lot. And next time I'm going to remember to turn off the talkback.
Oh no! Oh, that's right. Oh.
But that's okay. Right? You know, room sound is good sometimes, right?
Yeah, yeah. So we had Mitch commented Terry is the baddest drummer ever. A really wonderful person and musician. Love that guy. Who's Mitch?
Oh, I need to know the last name.
Shedlars.
Oh, he's wonderful. I've played many gigs with him. He's a fantastic band leader. He always sets the stage for a really comfortable situation for both the band and the audience. He's a very talented trumpeter, singer, and as I mentioned, band leader. Hey, Mitch.
That's awesome. Thanks, Mitch. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for your comment. That's amazing. And we also have another guest here, Roxanne Hammond, all the way from Sioux Lookout, Ontario, way north of me. A friend of mine, a drum student of mine, actually, and owns some Gretsch drums herself, a beautiful USA custom kit. So thanks for tuning in and for that comment. So how's it going? How are you?
I'm doing very well, and you're looking very good today. You're sounding very good.
There we go. I appreciate that. What a gorgeous room. So where are we talking to you from? I'm 90 minutes north of Toronto, and there's a lot of snow here. It looks like winter wonderland. And you're in Brewster, New York, did you say?
That's correct, which is, I don't know how many miles that is from you, but it is in New York State. It is on sort of the border of Danbury, Connecticut, and Westchester, New York.
Okay.
Maybe in good traffic, if you want to call it that, an hour from Midtown Manhattan.
That's great. That's handy. So you get a beautiful, probably much more affordable housing market there rather than close to the city. And it's still, a good, not a bad commute at all if you have to go in.
It really is something. And it's a nice situation here with the house and the property and the location, and we're up on a big hill, so we have a beautiful view. But however, it's a major ice thing happening today, so I don't know. to get out. So not so much snow, but they're calling for a sheet of ice. So
Oh boy. Well, February the 4th, stuff like that's bound to happen here. We got a dumping this week, that's for sure. But it's great to be here. I've been reading about you for probably since I've been a Gretsch artist for a couple of years, perusing the site to see if I recognize all of the names. I kept seeing this Terry Silverlight name here, and I dive into it. And over the last couple of weeks, once I found out we were going to be chatting, looking at the discography and looking at the things that you've done, especially the last few days. It's like, what is the criteria for having a Wikipedia page? Like, I think you have to have something done a little bit more than the average bear, right? Like so certainly your Wikipedia page is pretty cool. As I was talking to you, I'm like scrolling the credits. It's like, wow. And wonderful. I'm super happy for your success, and really more happy that you're here and you're going to share kind of your journey. But I wanted to begin with how has the pandemic affected your work for the last couple of years?
Well, as you mentioned, I have a new album out called In My Own Silverlight, which is sort of a giveaway as to what the direction of the album is. But I had been the introduction to that album is me talking and explaining that I've been into writing music and creating tracks on my own since I was a little kid. And there are some examples in that introduction of me when I was, I think, 11 years old, when a little 1 minute song, me playing the piano keyboard and singing, writing the lyrics and the music. And then there's another one when I was 12, and then another one when I was 16. So I've done, as you know, a lot of collaboration, but I've always been interested in just writing and putting tracks together and whole productions myself. So this is the first album that I've done like that, where it's entirely me. I'm singing very selectively on songs that I, care to render from a songwriter's point of view.
Sure.
But to directly answer that question, though, as far as the pandemic is concerned, it certainly allowed. I had started working on that album, the material for it, well before the pandemic. But the pandemic allowed me a lot of time to complete it. So that's one of the major things I was doing during the pandemic.
Well, that's true. So, wow, I'm getting a bit of echo here. There we go. Nice. Anyway, that is terrific. What about live work? Are you able to do any live playing now? Have you been out playing in the last year or so?
Yes.
Okay.
I have been playing in some clubs, a few concerts. There is a gig tonight that I'm hoping to get to.
Oh boy. Wow.
And with this ice thing, I have everything, my text and phone on hold here. But after the interview, I'm going to check and see if the gig has been canceled or not. It's only about an hour away, but it could be things. So the answer to that is any chance I get to play, I do.
That's amazing. I'm glad to hear it. The States is definitely a little bit different than Canada here as far as work and things being open. We are just kind of opening again, but theaters are still closed where I primarily play. But hopefully that's going to be opening up in the next month or so we can kind of get back to work. But I wanted to ask you, let's go back to the very beginning of your drumming and music experience. Terry, how old were you when you started playing drums? Was it music first? Was it drums first? Was it both? What was that?
Okay, so I'll try to be as abbreviated as possible, if that's possible.
Take your time.
Okay. It really starts with my brother, Barry Miles, who is 10 years older than I am. And when I was 11 years old, when I was 4 years old, let me back up. When I was like 4 years old, he had already been in the music business, very active and doing a lot of high profile things by that time, as a drummer and as a writer. There are gigs that he did in the Newark, as you mentioned, we grew up in the Newark area, central New Jersey, and he went for it. There are posters that he has of him playing Little Barry Miles Boy Wonder with John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Billie Holiday. And there are some videos and recordings of that stuff. So when I was born, that's what I came into, was that kind of an environment. And he had this amazing record collection that spanned classical music and jazz. And I had a rocking horse. So he would leave for school and I would get on the rocking horse, and he would, in those days, I don't know if anybody would remember this or no, but there actually were vinyl records at that time, and there were record machines that had changers. So you could stack up like 5 or 6 vinyl albums on the top of the changer, and the bottom, on the disc would that record would play. And then when it got to the end of the side, then the arm would go back and the next record would drop and that would play. So he had it timed that I would stay out of my mother's hair the entire day, and he would like stack, all right, here's a Miles Davis record, now here's a Max Roach record, and here's this record. And by the time he got back from school, the last record was about to go down, and I would be rocking my horse the whole way to this. So I was peripherally, or as much as I could, concentrating on the rhythm, melody, the harmony, and trying my little brain to focus on all of the elements of the music. So that was the very beginning of it. Fast forward to the first professional thing that I played drums on. Yes, I got interested in specifically playing the drums. And again, he was a drummer, so there was a drum set around the house. And I started messing around with it when I was about 12, and real seriously, like summer vacation when I was 12 years old, I just went for it. And I think the first beat that I tried to play was on the bass drum. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the hi-hat, and as fast as I possibly could. So it would be like, okay, but there were other grooves too, but the idea that I really focused on trying to get it together. Barry noticed that and said, I want to work on the material for a new album. So why don't you play and I'll mess around on the piano and whatever. So I got to improve as a drummer playing the music that he was writing. And it turns out that 2 years later, when I was 14, he said, I finished the material and I want to go in and record an album. Would you like to be the drummer on it? And by that time, I had already known the material because, I was there when he was writing it, and I was very accustomed to what was happening. So we went to the recording studio in New York when I was 14 at the record plant. And who was at the session was Pat Martino on guitar, John Abercrombie on guitar, Warren Smith on percussion, and Lou Tabakin on sax. And this is the album that came out of that, if you can see that. It's called White Heat. And
holy smokes,
got a lot of attention at the time. So not to, be too forceful or anything, but may I read you a couple of quotes?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
People who checked out that record at the time, if I can read this here. Okay, so this is from Pat Metheny. That record, White Heat, was such a mind blower. I remember when it first came out, turning everyone I knew onto it around Kansas City. And then when I found out how young you were, that totally blew my mind and inspired me. About a year after it came out, Lou Tabakin came to KC to play with Doc Severinsen, and I was playing in the band opposite them. And I remember taking that side up to Lou for him to sign, and he told me all about the session and stuff, which was really cool. Let's see. This is from Al Di Meola. Terry Silverlight was playing at the level of Tony Williams at the age of 14 years old. what is that? He was an absolute prodigy, which I had the pleasure of playing, who I had the pleasure of playing with, and Barry Miles's group back in 1973. So Al was in my brother's band when he was 18 and I was 16. And from some of the live gigs that we did, that's how Chick heard him play, and he got that gig, and it was so great playing with him. It was amazing then. I don't know. Here, I'll read you two others. But this doesn't have anything to do with the record. So one's from Phil Woods and another one's from Will Lee. But anyway, that's the idea. So that was how I started. It was from that album.
Did you have instruction or were you just listening and you could do it? Or did your brother, since he was a drummer, could show you these things? How did that work out?
Until I was about 20 years old, I had never taken any formal training. And at 20, and I would like to talk about it more specifically, maybe a little bit later, yeah. I took only 6 or 7 lessons from the great Morris Arnie Lang, who was the principal percussionist at the New York Philharmonic for 40 years, who passed away very recently. But aside from that, it was totally self-taught, doing it kind of the way that I explained, like really from the music. And my brother never gave me any formal lessons. He never said, well, you hold the sticks like this and, do these rudiments and do that. Occasionally, he would get behind the kit and say, sit in the corner and watch me play for 20 minutes, which was a great experience because it was like, seeing live performance of somebody who could really play and how it's supposed to be. But aside from that, it was just fun music and just my love for it, really.
Now, that's really rare for those watching. That is a really rare thing when you have someone who can play and achieve that kind of level with at a young age. So, but I think that was also the times too when that music, if you were turned on to that, it was reaching you at a certain other level, and I don't know if it projects you to play better, but when I had and still do the jazz / fusion material, it really elevated my abilities more than probably anything else, because you had to raise your independence, your chops, your ears, everything. It just opened a whole lot of other doors. Where did you guys get your musical gifts from? Because it's not normal, right?
Before that, to comment on what you said is beautiful, because what you're basically saying is that it really is. I mean, we're talking about music here, and that's really the core of everything. So it's not to say that I didn't become aware later on. I have a lot of stuff to get together here, reading and technique and so on and so forth, which I did do. But it all is about the music. And that's where the inspiration comes from, and exactly what you said, that it is what propelled you, catapulted you to get on a different thing without you even knowing it, really. It's just the music dictated it. Like, you need to play this, so get it together and play that. And if it weren't for the music, you may never have come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of both things. It's a combination of the ears and listening and the love of music, and then, working really hard to develop it in a classroom or situation, whether it's a classroom or your classroom, you do it privately or independently, or at a university. It doesn't matter, but you need to have some kind of a classroom situation, but don't forget about the music. So yes,
I agree, and it can't be stressed enough, because it's in the day and age of social media, of Instagram, of YouTube, and all of it, and TikTok. There's just so much. Let's play these drum licks, and how fast can you? And it has like little to no musical relevance at all. And I don't want to be the get off my lawn guy, but really, these guys probably haven't had any real gigs in their life, if they've even had a gig. So,
and that's why I'm so honored to be with Gretsch, because I need an instrument that is musical and that can do whatever the music calls for. And there's nothing like them.
Man, and that kit, the way that you have them set up there, that this angle, I hope you can't see it, but there's some drool happening coming out of here. They are absolutely stunning. We'll talk about those, but I wanted to ask you before we got into that, who were your drum heroes back then?
Two mainly, and first Max Roach,
Wow.
Gretsch,
Right? Yeah.
and second Tony Williams, Gretsch. Now there were
Yes.
others as well too, but those were the two main ones, I would say.
What about
Definitely.
what was it about Max Roach? I can tell you have a Tony influence from the solo, and I love it. But yet you made it sound like you. There were some Tony references, but it didn't say, "Oh man, he's ripping off Tony Williams." But I could tell just from the flams and some of the sticking patterns that there was some
Sure.
Tony stuff in there. But what was it that you loved about Max? There's so much.
Probably the same thing Tony Williams did, which is exactly what we were just talking about, the music. He was so melodic. He always had melody when he played solos. It was always based upon like a call and response, a story. He told a story. So he would start with some kind of a melodic theme and then develop it on the different drums, maybe start, high, low, real fast. A lot of times, definitely showing, I wouldn't say showing off, but like he had a lot of chops, he definitely, but it was so relaxed and just musical. So I think that's what the magnetism was about him were a few different elements. Just his groove.
Yeah.
His groove, his soloing, his musicality, his melodicism, and he was also a great writer and family. All of those things.
Wow. And Tony, what about Tony?
Same thing, really. I mean, same attributes, just a generation or two, whatever it was later. In his case, he was so young, and maybe he was a half a generation. I don't know. But, the same deal, just like a powerhouse talent as a musician. Everything was so musical with him. And what I noticed about both of them is that they very rarely repeated themselves. Like they had their sound, they had their stuff, but it wasn't like, well, now I'm going to play the page 42 Tony Williams lick number 53. It was never that. It was like every time I would hear him play, it would be a different variation of Tony Williams. And I know when I heard Aretha Franklin sing, it was the same thing. Never heard her sing the same thing twice because it's from the music.
Man, this is awesome. That it's so true. I assume that you had seen both Max and Tony play.
When I did the White Heat record, guess who walked in the control room when I was listening to a playback? Max Roach. So of all things, so here I am playing with all of these dudes, at the record plant in New York, and then in walks Max Roach. And he was there because he had recorded something maybe a few weeks before and was just there to pick up his tapes or something to mix them. And he checked it out and he listened. He said, "Man, it sounds like you really enjoy playing." And it was a really nice thing for him to say. Did I see him play live? I think I only saw him play once in Damrosch Park. He was playing, I think it was maybe 2 string instruments, a cello, violin. Maybe it was Warren Smith playing timpani, just like different. Something like you're not going to go to see Max Roach and expect to see, him with the band with Miles Davis and Charlie Parker. It's going to be something different. And that inspired me too.
They were always about moving forward and not being so stuck in history or stuck in time. And man, you would ask Tony, like, what's your favorite record? Well, the one that I haven't written yet, the next one, or this one, always moving forward, always progressing. And apparently when Tony, before Tony passed, he was working on playing double bass. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
Yeah. So
I can imagine it. I'm sure it would have been amazing. And as if he really needed to do that.
I know. Yeah, I could see some of the double bass players going, no, no, please don't do that. Please go.
Because the speed of his bass drum, the single bass drum,
Mm.
was phenomenal. You know, real good.
Yeah, love Tony. Love his. Yeah, love. I mean, I've got the big Tony poster behind me. Very huge, huge influence. Oh man, still.
That's fantastic.
That wow! I'm looking here now. Had you? I assume that you had seen Gretsch drums being in and around, the music, jazz music mecca of the world. Had you played Gretsch drums when you were young, or was it something you heard, or when did you first encounter some real Gretsch drums live?
It's hard to remember the specific time, but I can say that I've played Gretsch drums forever. Now, I became a Gretsch endorser on April 3rd. It will be 20 years.
Wow.
And that's how, I can't believe it, but that's how old these drums are. And they don't sound old. They sound like completely new. But I've always been a fan of Gretsch drums. I mean, hearing other people like Elvin Jones and Tony and Max, and the list goes on and on and on, of all the greats and rock players as well. So yeah, I've played them forever.
That's
Can't
wonderful.
give you a first date like when I was born, Gretsch. Okay.
Now, why? How did your Gretsch relationship? It's been so 20 years. You've been a Gretsch artist coming up, and how did that relationship develop? How was that born?
I don't quite remember.
It's been 20 years.
It's been 20 years. I think it was a mutual situation that I believe, now that I'm recalling, I approached them and said, I want to play your drums and I would love to be an endorser, and they accepted.
Wow. That's a nice way to do it. That's really terrific.
Yes.
And
that is exactly how it happened, now that I recall.
can we talk about that drum kit? Normally I wait a little bit, but
Oh,
man,
yeah.
I've been staring at that drum kit now
Yep.
for a couple of days, and of course on your on the Gretsch site you've got some pictures of that. What is that? What's the color? What are the sizes?
Let's see if I can pull this off. I'm going to go to the other camera.
Oh, here we go.
Little tour, but that's left to be seen. I will try to do this. So I am going to switch the camera. You tell me if you can see it. Okay.
Yes.
And I'll be able to hear you, but I'm going to try to grab like the hi-hat mic, and so you can hear me. We'll try that.
I never get tired of this. I never tire of looking at drums, Gretsch drums. Beautiful Paiste cymbals there as well. They sound wonderful. Oh, here we go.
So the question is, can you hear me at all?
I hear you. Yeah.
All right.
You have enough microphones in there, I think. Your overheads would probably pick me up.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Hang on here.
That's a gorgeous color, too.
So starting from left to right.
Yes.
This is actually, the way I have them too is from high to low. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 toms, and the first tom is actually a mini snare.
Oh, wow.
And I took the snares off. So that's what this silver one is.
That's cool.
It's a 10 inch.
Mm-hmm.
And then depending on which side you're looking at, let's just say next to it.
Your next one.
The actual drum that came with the kit is also a 10 inch. These are maple shell. And then next to that is a 12.
Mm-hmm.
And down here is a 14.
14 by 14, I believe. And they're mounted with legs. It really, opens up the sound, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then 16. Same thing with the one.
Oh, a 16 shallow 16 by 14, is it?
No. It might
There's
be
16.
It's
The square size?
it's deeper than the 14.
Okay. Oh, yeah, there we are. Yep. I see it. Wow.
It's a 16 by 16, I guess.
Are they the USA Custom or the USA Maple series that they had at one point?
Maple.
Are they die-cast hoops on those toms, Terry?
They are.
Okay. Wow. Those are stunning. That, and what is the color called? Do you remember? It's been 20 years.
No, I'm not sure. But it's a
Wonder if it's
really beautiful blue situation.
Looks like an azure blue, perhaps. I'm not sure.
That rings a bell.
And the tom mount is a Yamaha tom mount. I had that on a USA Custom kit.
Really?
That I do not have any longer, sadly, and I absolutely loved it. I've got to tell you, I loved that tom mount, the yes system, the whole deal.
Yeah, they're very flexible. So they have that. What is that? That ball.
Yep.
Joint thing. So they you can circle around in a lot of different positions.
And they're direct to shell mounting, are they? Are those the Yamahas? Are they right? Yeah, are they right to the shell? Looks like it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. They sound incredible. And what are the sorry, the bass drum, is that a 20?
No, it's an 18.
That's an 18. That's right. You told me the other day. Wow. Kidding.
And, I have the Evans heads on all of these, but I have the EMAD on the batter side.
Wow.
And with that and this drum, like you tune it low and it's a Canon, and then you can tune it real tight if you want the 60s, jazz sound.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you want. I mean, these drums, it's all of them are so flexible. You can rock them out or jazz them out, whatever you want. And fast, very quickly, you can morph them into something else.
And your snare, what's the snare?
I also have a 22-inch bass drum, by the way. That is, the same deal, just like phenomenal. So it's a matter of preference on certain gigs, certain things that I'm recording. This snare is, let's see if I can get some kind of a view of it. It is a 13.
We're losing your audio a little bit.
Can you hear me now?
There we go. Yeah. That's the free floater.
It's a free floating 13-inch, a combination of maple and brass. There's a brass ring in the center, so you can really hear both elements with that. You hear the wood, and you hear the metal. And same thing with this. I have it tuned kind of tight right now, to give it that crack snap thing, but you can get it really fat as well. And I also have the kit, more that came with the kit, which is the same color, and it's a 14, and this is also just fantastic. And I can't tell you when I use one or the other. I guess if it's more of a jazz kind of thing, I'll go with this. But I hate to say that because it would be whatever you're playing, it sounds great.
Yeah.
So kind of what's going on with it. So from a distance, this is what it looks like. At this angle. Check it out from here.
That is beautiful. That really is a beautiful drum set.
I'm thrilled with it. Every time I sit down to play these things, it's like I don't know if I'm going to be able to leave this kit within 4 hours.
Right.
I'm going to put this camera back up on the stand, if I may.
Yes, that little kit tour. Oh, that was awesome. So that is your iPhone, correct?
It is.
That's ridiculous how great the cameras are,
Yep.
They're just so much better than they were on my iPad now. I know it would sound better if I were to have my vocal mic or an AT4040 I have here, but I love how simple this is. It looks great. It sounds fine for the moment. At some point when I do upgrade my Mac, but I love just being able to be right here in the drum room and the ease of it. It's incredible. So, wow.
It
Congrats on that beautiful drum kit and the endorsement. They make wonderful drums. As you said, they are super versatile. You can bring an 18 out and you can play rock with it. You mic'd up. You can play jazz with it. Do you change the tuning very much on different situations? Like if you're playing a jazz gig that kind of crosses over into pop territory, what do you do?
Not a whole lot, because I kind of default to maybe what it is right now today. So let me go over to the drums and just tap them and see what the pitches are.
Very melodic. Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of it has to do with the playing. So if
Yeah.
man, if I can just take this one out here, I would actually do more with changing the sticks. So these are Promar NZ11s, I believe, N4Z, NJZ11s, and they're very so if I wanted to emulate more of a jazz thing, it would be just in the playing. But if I wanted a real tight kick sound, I'm just cranking up the lugs. I might pull out some of the stuff that I have in there, but it's just so quick to look at that. So now back where it was.
Wow.
Anyway, to kind of answer the question, I might for something like that.
Wow, if you work at it, you might have some kind of success, Terry.
We'll call you.
My people will call your people.
Definitely. So, yeah.
That bass drum sounds huge. That bass drum's beefy.
I changed the heads to coated heads sometimes. There's a cut on my new album that I wrote the song based upon a melody on the drums that I was kind of messing around with when I first started playing before. I don't have it tuned exactly to that song right now, but that's the idea. So yes, there are occasions where I'll tune the drums very specifically to notes.
Wow. I wanted to ask you, since when we were doing the sound check, like, do you tune the top and bottom heads to the same pitch? Do you tune them a fourth apart, or what is your tuning method?
Ear.
Okay. What about the heads? Like, do you tune the bottom and the top the same?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Okay.
Right now that the bottom head is slightly higher than the top head on the 10 sheet.
Right.
I would say, to answer that, we're just kind of equal. And just again, by ear for me, just messing around with it, where it sounds good, where the drum lives. So if something sounds choked, I'll start messing around with the bottom head to either tighten it, and the same thing with the top head, just and the combination of the two. So I don't really have a method with that. Just when it sounds right, I leave it right back there.
They sound wonderful.
I'm thrilled with them.
I can imagine how great they sound if they sound good through, through our devices and whatnot through here. And as we all know, that drums are super tough to get to sound wonderful. Through recording drums is arguably the hardest instrument to record because of there's so much going on. And if you can tell how great they sound through these earbuds and through through the airwaves here, imagine how wonderful they sound there. It's incredible.
They have made it so easy for me, and like you said, it isn't always a challenge to get a drum sound, no matter who or where or what. And just having like a great instrument like that just makes that part of it, like, starting instead of starting like from complete scratch, they just sound great, like right from the get-go. So I don't really have a method with the tuning of them. They just they sound good no matter what you do.
They're very forgiving. I find that if you could have them not quite dialed in, but they sound super good. They sound really, and once you get them dialed in, it's like, whoa. I remember I hardly ever would have to tweak my Gretsch drums, an old and probably a mid 80s USA kit I would get to the gig. I'd be like, once the heads are broken in a little bit, like, oh, they still sound great. Wonderful.
It's not something. It's true. Just right off the bat, they're fantastic. But yeah, I do spend a lot of time, experimenting and just tweaking things with the recording at different levels, different EQs and stuff like that. But I've been learning to back off on that stuff as much as possible, and because the drums just sound great the way they are, just a little of this, a little of that, only to accommodate what's happening with the rest of the track. If the rest of the track is getting overwhelming it a little bit, I might throw on a little more highs, a little more lows, but I'm learning just a little bit. I started like putting on all of this stuff, compression and limiters and stuff, and it actually does the opposite. It starts muffling things and detracting. Stuff just sounds good the way it is.
Wonderful. I wanted to go back in time. Apparently, you went to Princeton for music, and I wasn't sure that was really a music school or what the program was like there. But what was your experience going to Princeton for music?
Okay, well, I actually didn't go for music. I went for the opposite. Having started out with that recording when I was 14, for the next 4 years, all through high school, I was playing and recording and a little bit of touring, a lot of gigs, but in the Midwest and the East Coast. So I was like deeply into it with the music, and I got to play with a lot of really great musicians. Some more albums I did with my brother. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 more. And I was writing, and there are some of my songs on those albums, and writing pop songs. Aside from the Tony Williams thing, major Beatles fan, major Led Zeppelin fan, I was listening to other music, not just jazz, and classical music as well. So when I was 18, it was like, well, I really should go to college. So it turned out that Princeton I got accepted there. I got accepted to all of the schools that I applied to, but I really wanted to go to Princeton because it was like beautiful there, and just the reputation of the academics was of the highest level. But they didn't have at that time a jazz program or anything contemporary, to my knowledge. So in fact, I think I brought more to it. By the time I was there, I brought in, people from New York, and did arrange concerts and stuff with my own music. It was a blast for the first 6, 7, 8, 9 months, and then my brother called me and said, "Do you want to do a gig at the Vanguard in New York?"
Wow.
And Vic Juris was the guitar player at the time. And I said, okay. So I left school for, I don't know, maybe 2 days to rehearse with them. And then the weekend, I guess it was like a Thursday or a Wednesday through Sunday thing. And when I came back from that, it was like, man, it just doesn't feel like I'm practicing. I'm developing, really great. So consequently, the leave of absence, you're able to keep the leave of absence, consequently, I've been absent.
We're going a little wonky here with the audio. Do you hear me okay?
I do. Do you hear me? And
Yeah,
where
I
did I
do
leave?
now.
Where did I?
Just maybe about 2 sentences ago, when
So
you had come back to Princeton, things weren't quite the same for you.
exactly, and I had to make a decision whether to stay, leave, or just a major thing. So I took a leave of absence, and from that school, you're allowed to take a leave of absence for 3 years, and you can come back. So consequently, I've been absent ever since. Never went back.
Wow. Now, you casually mentioned I was writing music. Like, did you have formal training on piano, another instrument, theory training? That just doesn't come out of normal people, right? Like,
Well, actually, I was lucky enough to take piano lessons, and I
okay,
did it for quite some time. I think I started when I was maybe 9 years old,
there we
and
go. Good.
even went back to this unbelievably great teacher when I took that leave of absence. Her name was Olga von Till. She had studied with Bartok, Bela Bartok. She was from Hungary, and she was just like, everything that I really should have had on the drums. So I would play, da da stop. You're not relaxed. Da da da. Nope. Stop right here. No good. Da 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 da. And those were what the lessons were like. Very little repertoire, very little theory and harmony. Some, there were pieces to play, but it was the technique. So I knew that I would never want to be a pianist, a performing one, and I would never play live. I won't play live. I won't play a song for you. I don't know any songs, but I do have a technique enough that whatever I hear writing, I can articulate it. And it was just, I'm really lucky that I had the chops to do that for writing. As far as taking specific writing lessons, no, I never did that either.
Now, I asked you this, but I didn't actually get an answer. Where did the musical blessings come from? Come from your parents? Did it come from someone in your family? Did you inherit this? Please don't tell me that nobody in your family played music until you guys.
Well, as I mentioned, I got it mostly from my brother. Now, where
Right.
he got it, I mean, he's like ridiculous. When he was 4 years old, they said this kid has talent there. But
Like that.
it's on my mother's side. Her two brothers were musicians. One was a saxophonist who played in the style of Coleman Hawkins, though he didn't do that full time. He had another day gig. And the other brother was a pianist in the style of like Teddy Wilson, and it was his main gig. And he was a really great teacher. And what I found out later is that he taught Alan Pasqua a few lessons. And Alan Pasqua was Tony Williams' pianist for a little while. And to be sure about that, I asked Alan, did you? And he said, yeah, I took like 2 or 3 or 4 lessons from your uncle. So anyway, the talent was from my mother's side with that. On my father's side, he was more of the MC, the show business lover, that part of it. But there is I wouldn't say music on his side, but in the music business, his ancestors were the original publishers of Beethoven and Bach, Breitkopf, Herdel, and if you look that up, you'll see that name. So,
Wow.
but musically, it's on my mother's side.
The musical heritage runs deep in your family, right? And in your DNA. That's wonderful. You're like, what are you talking about, kid?
Well, no, I was just thinking that if you look at some of Beethoven's memoirs, he'll write like letters to Breitkopf and Harris saying, "Where's my money? You're not paying me for the publishing of this."
That's awful, but
Yeah.
that's funny.
There you
How
go.
is your brother's last name? Why is it different than yours? Is that his middle name? Was it a stage name?
Both his middle name and his stage name? And when he was, as I mentioned, very young, and when he was 9, 10, 11 years old, it was in the late 50s, and it was in to have a short stage name. The name Silverlight was a little out to lunch, in those days. So my parents gave him his middle name as his stage name, and he just kept that.
Cool. I kind of thought it might have been when I was reading about your brother. Wow, what an amazing story thus far, and we haven't even really got into speaking too much about other artists. I've got a little list here, and if you're okay with that, I'd like to start with Billy Ocean, just because I certainly remember that album and that time. I was probably 17 or so when that Suddenly came out. Beautiful, beautiful. So what was your experience like with Billy? How did the gig come about? Apparently everyone, Terry has never really auditioned for any gigs. It's been word of mouth, which is wonderful, because auditions can be kind of rough and hard on people, and they can suck. But thankfully, you've had some great success just from word of mouth, and they know how you play and they know how you are as a person. Let's talk about your Billy Ocean experience.
Sure. I mean, it sort of came about in a similar manner to what you just described. When I first moved into New York, I formed a band, and the keyboardist was Barry Eastman, and the bassist was Wayne Brathwaite. Wayne passed away many years ago. He was like 32 years old, and he was one of the greatest bass players I've ever played with. Fortunately, before he passed away, he played with Herbie Hancock, and he's did that stint for a while, and worked his way up to becoming a very, very successful record producer. Anyway, those two guys were in my band, and Barry Eastman also ended up becoming a very, very successful producer. He recommended me for that session. He did not produce that album that Suddenly is on. He didn't produce that song. The name of the album is Suddenly, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly is, the title track, I guess you would call it, on that. He wrote, I think, the string arrangements on it, and he was the keyboardist. I don't think Wayne was the bassist on that album. But anyway, Barry recommended me to Keith Diamond, who did produce the album, and that's how that came about.
What were the sessions like? Do you remember?
Yeah. That was the first of several that I did with him. And on all of them, he sang with the band, with the tracks, which is not always the case. A lot of times on, pop R&B sessions, at least in those days that I remember, the artist wouldn't be there at the session, and the producer would hire a very good vocalist to fill in, just so that the rhythm section could hear how the song goes. But that was not the case with Billy, and he was there, and it was great because playing the track, I heard him sing, and the way I played was inspired by that amazing voice he has and the feel that he got. So it was a great production move by Keith Diamond to be aware of that, have the artist there to sing it, so that the rhythm section this is not an overdub thing. This is not like a cookie cutter drum part. What is the beat or the groove that you would play if you heard Billy Ocean singing the final thing? So I remember the session being very musical.
Wow. Was it many takes of it? Was there just a few? Do you remember any details?
Not totally specifically, but that session, and there were two songs on that day. It was Suddenly and Long and Winding Road, which is also on the album.
Right.
And it's a beautiful arrangement that Keith did, and I guess the strings were arranged by Barry Eastman. So those two songs, very typically in those days, 3-hour session. Show up at 2, you're done by 5. But it was a 3-hour date. So the first part of the session, and there were no charts.
Really?
Yeah, this is like, I was probably played a demo of the song. Let's say, Suddenly, already knew Long and Winding Road, but maybe not the arrangement. But let's talk about Suddenly, that I was probably played a demo that Keith had created. And I think the band probably listened to it a few times. I'm just sort of speculating because so many sessions were done that way. They were in with a little demo. You listen to it a few times. With me, I always like to write stuff down. So very likely I had a little piece of paper with a pencil and started writing the form down, like the verses, 8 bars, the little B section might be 4 bars, the chorus is 8, blah, blah, blah. It's just likely to be a fill on bar 8, but real fast because they want to get this thing done, 3 hours. So I believe that's really how it went down. As far as how many takes were done, I really can't imagine there being any more than 2, 3, maximum 4 takes of each of those. Maybe a run through a few times, parts of the song. And
was there a click?
Probably, yeah. Which I always like to, not always, but I often I request that. This way there's no argument. It's like, this is the tempo.
Yeah.
So yes, it was most likely a click, which is always a challenge because, you're multitasking. So now I'm trying to memorize the form. I might have a little piece of paper next to me, but basically know the form, know what I'm going to be playing the fills. I mean, Suddenly is a pretty simple drum part, but when you're doing it, you have 3, 4 takes to do it. And they weren't into punching in drums in those days. Just, we'll take the best take, the whole take.
That's awesome.
Played from beginning to end as flawlessly as possible because that's what's going on the record. So anyway, you're multitasking. You're concentrating on the form of the song, the where you're supposed to be playing what, a fill here. This groove is a little bit different in the chorus than it is in the verse. Maybe go on to the ride, and most of all, make it sound like music. Just have fun, just play and get a feel and a groove out of it because that's people are going to be dancing to this thing.
And you'd had plenty of experience playing live and recording, at that point, so did you still get nervous, in the studio back doing sessions like that in the day, or was it you were going to work and it wasn't, you just dealt with it?
Both. It all depends on what was happening around me. You don't make me nervous. You make me very comfortable. Well, really, I mean, that's so important. So that's the kind of atmosphere that brings out the best and the music and creativity and spontaneity and creativity. There are many, many gigs that I've done that were not like that. And yes, I got nervous, because it's well, now I'm thinking about, messing up because they're waiting for me to do that. And, but so the challenge in that is I don't want to know about it. I have to do the best I can not to be thinking about that stuff. And I'm here to do something. And if I get uptight, I'm not going to do it well. So relax.
It's great advice.
Somebody like you, starting the thing off immediately, it's a relaxed situation. So if I mess up, it's my own fault.
As you started your opening solo, I was thinking, man, sometimes not bothered at all. Sometimes, however, I get a little self-aware and I'm thinking, oh, yeah, you get tight after you get playing a little bit, all good. But that sometimes you kind of look at yourself a little bit and get a little nervous. Oh,
Definitely.
hey, Daniel Barnes, a fabulous Canadian Gretsch drummer here, tuned in. Little comment here. Love this. Funny and wise Terry. Hi, Daniel. Terrific drummer from Toronto. Great family of musicians as well, and his brother and his mom and dad. Incredible. Great. Had him on the show early on. Wonderful guy. Can we move on to talk about what your experience is like with George Benson?
Very similar. Say it was, an album that I had played on for him called Twice the Love. And what I described with the Billy Ocean session is very, very similar to George's session. He wasn't playing guitar on this. He was singing. It was an R&B date. And but he was singing along with the band, and he was just a lovely person, like really, soft spoken and just kind and nice. And it was just like, I'm playing and that's George Benson singing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that would be amazing to hear
Really
that voice in your headphones, right, as you're playing. Wow, it's really George Benson, and he's right
Yeah.
there. That's
wonderful.
wow. I have a list of these artists that I scooped from your website. So we'll just run these down. I've got Phil Woods next. What was your experience with Phil Woods? And for those of us who are the folks that are watching now that aren't necessarily jazz as their first language, can you give us a little bit of history on who Phil Woods was?
Phil Woods was one of the greatest alto saxophonists who ever lived, in the coming from the style of Charlie Parker. And he has had many albums under his own name, and with duets with other people. There was Phil and Quill, Gene Quill. A lot of different combinations of recordings that he made. I think what the general audience would probably be most familiar with is he takes the iconic saxophone solo on Just the Way You Are, Billy Joel's song.
That's right.
And every time I've done a gig where that song comes up and there's a saxophonist on it, they religiously play that solo exactly like the record.
Good.
And I played with Phil very shortly after he recorded that song. It was very cool. So that's please do a Google search, everybody, about Phil Woods. Check him out. He was one of the world's greatest. Now, I said he comes from the Charlie Parker thing, but he could really play contemporary. He had amazing technique. I don't want to say I've never played with anybody quite like, but let me say it. I've never played with anybody with that energy, that amount of technique on his instrument, his ability to sight read and just like nail it on the first situation. That was, from what I heard from him and from other people, that Billy Joel solo was one take. Just he came in, played it, and he left.
I believe it.
And when I played with him, I witnessed that kind of behavior firsthand. It was just, and how inspiring. So can I talk a little bit about specifically my experience with him? Now, I did play with his quintet. I forgot to mention that he had a quintet, Phil Woods Quintet, that recorded many albums and did many gigs. And the regular drummer in that band was the great Bill Goodwin. I was lucky enough that when Bill couldn't make a few gigs, that both Phil and Bill called me to sub. So I did some of those live quintet gigs with Phil at clubs in New Jersey and the New York area. First time that I ever was not able to get my
You're going a little wonky on your audio there again.
he was
There we are.
He was like a megastar. He was one of the first people that I played with where when I walked into the gig to bring my drums, and I couldn't even get through the front door because there was a line around the block.
Wow.
So popular. But the the greatest experience I had with him was going over to London to record 5 albums within the course of about 10 days that he was the featured soloist on all of them. So this was at Olympic Recording Studios. It was a beautiful studio that the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had occasionally recorded in. And there was a Phil Woods album. There was a Kenny Wheeler album. Kenny Wheeler was a great trumpeter. 2 Michel Legrand albums and a Mel Torme album. And all of these records, all of these sessions were done back to back with a live orchestra, the London Symphony Orchestra, and Will Lee on bass. He flew over, I flew over, my brother's on it, and Vic Juris is the guitarist, and Phil, as I mentioned, was the soloist. So it was like one chart after the next. I was in the drum booth. Okay, here's the next one. I didn't even know what albums that they would end up on. Some ended up on this, some ended up on that one, just one chart after the next.
Wow.
And it was 1977, so I was 20 years old. I had some experience doing stuff other than with my brother, but not a lot. So this was just like an amazing opportunity for me to either sink or swim. So I did what I had to do. I ended up on all of it. Phil came over to the drum booth and I said, this is it. He's going to fire me. He's going to say, kid, go back home. And he said, you know, kid, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes. You're doing a great job. It's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's wonderful. So what a great inspiration and a great person, because he could have like turned the whole thing around and like we're talking about, made me so uptight. You know, obviously I was a little on edge with the whole thing. And he came and just like chilled me out. So it was an amazing experience. And when I go back to listen to those records, it's like, they're pretty cool. And there is one side story that I heard that Mitch Mitchell was in the other studio. And I said, I got to meet him because he's like one of my idols, you know, the drummer with Jimi Hendrix, one of 2 drummers, I guess, with Jimi Hendrix. So I heard he was in the next studio. So I just, during a break, went out in the hallway and there he is. He came at it. He was doing a jingle. Like, it's really quite surprising. He was doing it. It was like 10:30 in the morning. He was in there doing a jingle. He came out with like the jumpsuit on and he was just lovely. It was so great to meet him. Anyway, it was
That's
was good.
crazy. Did you get the charts ahead of time for this, or are you kidding? They threw them at you. They put them up and counted the tune off. Did they run anything down before?
Well, as usual, in little sections, like not for me, but like for the string section. Oh, let's take it from bar 190,000. You know, these were like long charts, man. Let's take it from this section. Let me just hear the violin section here. If you want to play drums to it, you go ahead. And which was my opportunity to look at the chart and say, it was like on the fly. And
that's amazing.
And mostly one take. And then there's Willie on bass, who, you know, was one of my idols to begin with. And it was just so great for him to be there. And he had all of that together, just like an amazing sight reader and just first take and everything. So yeah, that's what was around me with this. Sink or swim.
That's incredible. Yeah, I've got 15 questions in my mind now. So was something like that experience, did that prepare you for what was to come? And were a lot of the other sessions or live work, was that a lot easier on you now that you had done that at such a young age and had some good success, being able to play that music well and not mess anything up? Did that make what you were going to do a little bit easier for you?
Definitely. Just having that experience, that opportunity, definitely, I wouldn't say it made it easy because every session is a challenge.
Yeah.
So, but easier. It definitely was like, well, I have done this before. So come on, you can do this again.
So you said in the beginning that you didn't read initially since you were self-taught. So how did you get the reading together?
Well, the piano lessons definitely gave me some insight to it. But what really happened is that at that time that I left Princeton, I moved back with my parents, and in those 3 years, I turned on the heat with everything. So I went to the basement. I got this book. If you don't have it, you probably have it, but anybody listening that would be interested, if you don't have it, get Robert Starr's rhythmic training book. So I
No,
would take.
never heard of that. Really?
I don't have it right here with me, but it is great. It's just 8, 16, 32 bars of various rhythmic variations on a staff. So 16th notes, 8th notes, combinations, different time signatures. So I set up a metronome and just take like exercise number 1, real simple, and just play it at a reasonable tempo with the metronome, and then I would crank it.
Yep.
And then the next exercise would be now sight read it and don't make any mistakes from the beginning to the end. So I've really trained myself to do that.
I'm gonna check that out.
There was another one. Oh man, there was another book that was similar that just had a lot of various exercises. Again, I had the opportunity to play in a lot of situations during that time that were just being thrown into the fire. I did whatever I possibly could to network, take gigs, meet people, and to jam. I had a loft in New York that I was splitting with a few other drummers. It was like $60 a month or something. I had a set of drums up there, and I proceeded to call everybody who I wanted to play with and see, would you come up and jam with me? And there were a lot of really great people. There was Gil Goldstein, John Schofield, Steve Slagle, Jeff Berlin, Joe Caro, just various people. And that was a great experience. And through that, I got some gigs. I took every gig I possibly could. I took a lot of big band gigs that were reading gigs, and they were show up at this time. The gig starts at 10. No rehearsal, just here's the book, go play it with the big band. And just so having that experience with doing that in Manhattan at great venues like 7th Avenue South, just to do it, I have to say that was sort of my education.
Yeah, that beats, today where there's well, especially now with the pandemic time, there's nowhere to play really at this point. If there are, it's just a different time is what it is. And so we have to make the best of it. I asked about that drum book because I have a lot of them here, and I do teach, and I've been teaching a long time and love it. And I've never heard of that, and I practice my tail off and do tons of reading. Pat Petrillo has a really terrific reading thing available through Hudson Music, and it's called Learn to Read Rhythms. And it starts off super simple, and then it gets to where it's not. And it's I love that. I love torturing myself and doing that kind of thing. Yeah,
good word. Torture.
It's exactly that, and my poor students get the same thing.
Push yourself.
Yeah. Wow. What an amazing situation. Can we talk about playing with, well, we've got a few more here. We have, what about Freddie Jackson? Was that around the same time?
Yeah. So can't really give you like a special situation with that. That was just another one of R&B dates that I did that were done in the same fashion. Just a rhythm section would come into the studio and just play, learn this, just get a groove going.
You didn't bring drums in there. There was a house kit in those places, correct?
Or a rental, either a house kit or oftentimes rental. And of course, I would always request Gretsch.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
So it's a good day.
Gretsch drums are on either all of that stuff or just about all of those recordings. Whenever it was that I had the opportunity to choose what drums I wanted to have rented, that's what it would be.
Oh, amazing. I love being able to now request Gretsch backline gear, and it's a treat when you see that.
In fact, I'm on Billy Ocean's most current album, and it was great, a great reunion to get back with him. I don't know if I have the cover of that record right here, but it's called "Here You Are," and it was such a blast playing on it. It was just a couple of years ago, and Gretsch.
Wow. That's cool. I didn't realize that. I'm going to have to check that out. Here You Are, Billy Ocean.
Well, Here You Are, and all of the songs are songs that Billy grew up with in Trinidad, like songs that were dear to his heart. Cry Me a River. I can't remember the other songs on it, but just beautiful songs. And the bassist is Freddie Washington, who is Steely Dan's bassist. So it was great playing with him. And Barry Eastman, who I mentioned, got me on the original Billy Ocean date. He produced this latest album and played keyboards on it.
Wow, that's fabulous.
Again, Billy was singing live with us, and it was just great experience. Just all groove songs. But yeah, the Gretsch drums are just amazing, man, on that. Check out the album just for listening to the sound of the drums.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Natural sounding, so human. They're beautiful.
They have a whole lot of soul. The soul that you have, they tend to translate, and they've got something special that Yamaha drums don't have. Sonar drums, Tama drums, there's something special. I don't know if it's a silver sealer, the maple gumwood, the die-cast hoops. It's Fred and Dinah's love. I don't know what it is, man, but it's in there,
There was a situation. There's an album that one of my albums. I'll show you. I have the cover right here. It's called Wild, and I co-produced it with Willie. He's the bassist on it, and here are some photos that Will's wife Sandrine Lee took photos of. So we have Edgar Winter, Paul Schaefer, Hiram Bullock, Will, Chuck Loeb, Lou Soloff, David Mann. Who else on here? John Clark, Mike Raschuti. Yep. Anyway, the engineer was Jason Corsaro, who, if you do a Google search with him, he's recorded everybody. He unfortunately passed away too not that long ago. He recorded a few of Tony Williams' albums on Blue Note, but he was a rock and roll dude, and engineered a lot of iconic albums. So anyway, in the studio, I brought my Gretsch drums and the ones that you're seeing here with the 22-inch bass drum, and there was a house kit. And just to get his advice and his opinion, let me play both. This is before everybody walked in for this session. Let me play both. What do you think? Use your drums. Use Gretsch. There you go. And there was no question in my mind. I just wanted to hear this guy, say it. And that's what's on that album, are my beautiful Gretsch drums. Wow. And I wrote all the stuff on it, by the way.
Where can we find this music of yours?
In the East River. No. No, it's available at all your favorite record stores, outlets, Amazon, Apple.
Okay.
Very, very easy.
Wonderful.
And on YouTube.
That's great.
As are all my albums, and there are several.
I can't wait to have a listen. I'm looking at the list of artists here, and time is definitely ticking here. But how about? Oh, here we go. How about? Can we talk about any two more of your artists of your choice that we have not discussed?
Let's see. Name a couple, and
We've got Roberta Flack, Tom Jones.
Okay, yeah, I was with Roberta. I was with Roberta Flack's band for 2.5 years and toured all over the globe with her, and it was fantastic. Another one is maybe lesser known, but really meant a lot to me, was the Manhattan Jazz Orchestra, which was led, and I guess it still is, but I'll get to that, by the great arranger David Matthews, who's arranged for James Brown, Billy Joel, Paul Simon, and many other people. But he's an amazing big band arranger. So he has this band called the MJO, the Manhattan Jazz Orchestra, and I'm on about 15 of those albums. This is just one of them, and they're all originally released in Japan, and I've done about 15 tours of Japan, clubs like Birdland and the Blue Note and these beautiful concert halls over there with that band that consisted of like the cream of the crop New York horn players, Lou Soloff, David Taylor. I don't know, the list goes on. Randy Brecker, had played on some of it, and it was just fantastic. And I love Dave's writing, so that I really enjoyed doing that one.
Is that a scene anymore? Like, does anybody, like pre-pandemic, would that have happened in 2019 or early 2020, where that band would go to Japan and play?
I did. I was over there in 2018 and did that tour that I described, that kind of a tour of concert halls and those clubs. And his band is like real successful over there, and there's a big audience for it. He called us back like in January of 2020 to do it again.
Wow.
And I got a call in March. I mean, he called us in January to do a tour like in April or May. And he called in March and said, nah, this is not going to happen.
Right.
So
Wow.
didn't happen.
Unbelievable. Can we talk a little bit about you're also, so not only do you have all of this experience as a drummer and as a composer of your own material, you've also written some pieces of music that have been in films such as One Fine Day, You've Got Mail, Object of My Affection, My Blue Heaven, and some more. How did that come about, and what kind of pieces of music are in those that are yours?
Okay. Actually, those titles that you mentioned are ones that I played.
Okay.
So I actually have a little list here because I'm not going to remember the whole thing. But yeah, the movies you just mentioned. And actually, one of them was One Fine Day, which I play the title opening theme with Natalie Merchant. And we went on the Rosie O'Donnell show and performed the song in promotion for the album. And David Sanchez, I don't know if you know who he is. He was Sting's pianist for a very long period.
Yeah. Wow.
He was the musical director for that. So that was Natalie on that movie. So anyway, the titles that you mentioned were ones that I played on. Now, the ones that I wrote some music for, let's see if I can. Very recently, there was one on HBO called Greenland, and another one on, I believe, HBO or Netflix very recently within the last year was Defending Jacob. There was some stuff with Wahlberg, who's number one in the box office in the US for a couple of weeks. Marcy X with Pico, Sunshine Queen, Kevin Parkin,
You touch your mic again, please. Sorry, we're going a little warm. There we go.
How about now?
There we go. Yeah.
You have to wake it up every now and then.
That's
So
right.
I'll back up a little bit. Sunshine Cleaning with Alan Arkin, Emily Blunt, and Amy Adams. Mad About Mambo with Kerry Russell. Head Over Heels with Monica Potter and Freddie Prinze. And a lot of TV shows, including One Life to Live, The Sopranos, All My Children, Beverly Hills 90210, Young and the Restless, Melrose Place, CSI, NCIS, Ghost Whisperer, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Shield, Smash, Judging Amy, Drop Dead Diva, whatever.
So these are pieces of music that you've written that are on there?
Yeah, most of it is not score music, but songs,
okay,
like for particular scenes.
Wow.
So we went to, like on The Sopranos, what was it called? Bada Bang, Bada Boom, whatever that club was. I had several pieces on that. So when you see them dancing, that's their dancing to my music.
No way.
Yeah.
How did you ever get involved in something like that?
Well, from my love of songwriting and collaborating with people, and that particular publisher. Again, it was upon recommendation of a co-writer of mine who gave my name to this publishing company that was just starting out, and they needed somebody like me who was willing to write all the time, and I wanted somebody like them who was gung-ho about getting some placements, and it just propelled into they did get placements over the years.
That's
publishers too, but that one in particular.
So would you see royalties from that still occasionally?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nothing wrong with that. I have a friend who does TV placement thing. He's been writing for the last few years, and he's had his one of his latest pieces of music was in a celebrity comedy roast, and he was excited about it because you never know what's going to be picked up. He says he writes for libraries.
There you go. Yeah.
Very smart. Very smart. Wow.
So, but we need to talk with Spotify and those companies again, up the royalty rate.
Yeah,
So we won't get into that.
So I hear Milli Vanilli has pulled all of their or somebody else's music off of Spotify. That was another joke too. I know that's just terrible. So not only are you a songwriter, composer, drummer, but you're an educator and an author. Man, like, do you ever sleep? Do you ever like do anything else?
Sure, I'm sleeping right now. I am going to take a leave here for 2 seconds, okay?
Yeah.
And can you fill in some time for a second?
Oh, you bet.
It's like 3 minutes.
I'm going to sing Suddenly by Billy Ocean. You may have heard that song before, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm definitely not going to be singing that song. But this is incredible. So some takeaways for sure would be to, number one, learn piano, learn basic structure, learn maybe how to write. Maybe you're a drummer and you would like to play another instrument. I think it's super important that you do. And I've been back learning piano again the last almost a year and a half now, really just doing it much more than what I was, because there's a piano right here in the drum room, and it's been sort of painful going through the sight reading process, but really wonderful because I'm starting to see how things really fall together. And if you are putting off something like that, I encourage you to absolutely dive into a melodic instrument, because it is going to give you that side of the music theory where you understand better where the song is going, where and how it's composed. And who knows, you may have something inside of you as a creative person that you didn't know because you hadn't experienced doing something like that. I'm finding all kinds of really amazing things on the piano here and realizing, that this little chord is in this song. Also learning to play pop songs too, learning a couple of Beatles songs. But my point is that I wish I would have really stuck with this back when I was 20 years old, when I was starting to learn piano and learning drums at the same time at Ontario College of Percussion. So if anyone has any questions for Terry, please write them here in the comments. And this is super exciting to see just kind of what is possible for a musician. You definitely need to diversify. Great to play drums. You need to play lots of styles of music. You need to play and compose. All good. Terry, I can talk.
No. This is great. So where we left off was like the education situation. Yeah. Okay. What were you going to say?
Nothing. I think I was wanting to talk to you about, so had you been a drum teacher or a music teacher of some sort, and why did you release that drum play along book, that package, and how did that come about? Was it something you always wanted to do?
Yeah. Yes, I have been teaching privately for a long time, sometimes less than others, but here and there, that's always been like an underlying thread. So the book that I think you're referring to is this one. See?
Feature drum
right there. And it's published by Hal Leonard. I wrote it in, I think, 1980, and it was published about a year later. And it really is a lot of the stuff that I was playing on my brother's records, and some of the concept from that, which I guess if you were to break it down into simplest terms, just like odd rhythmic groupings over 4/4 time or 6/8 time. So in other words, if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. It's hard to articulate.
Yeah, I love it.
I'll slow it down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then different variations around the kit with that. So you could play it this way. I don't know if you can see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's right, left, right, left, left, right, left, right, left, left. That's one combination. Now you could put your right hand on the ride cymbal and left hand on the snare, and with the ride cymbal, the kick drum. So it's, and then if you get it faster, if you're playing, let's say a funk group, that's the idea. So just a book of like all, as many variations that I could think of, and the whole point is like for the reader, please come up with your own, because it's an endless thing. There are sevens. You can do the same thing with groupings of sevens, nines, 11s.
Wow.
You don't want to do this at somebody's wedding, but if you can incorporate that concept into your soloing, and also if you're in a fusion-y jazz situation and you're sparring with a soloist, or not sparring, but communicating with a soloist, you can add some of that stuff in there. So that's kind of what the book is about.
Wow, you'd written it that long ago?
Yeah, it was published, same company, but two times. It was published in 80, and I don't remember the exact year, but somewhere around like 2004, they reissued it with a different cover and play long CDs that John Patitucci. And I wanted to mention that the piece that I played at the beginning of the show here was an excerpt from that book. The exercises in the book, and then there's another CD where I'm not playing it all, and the reader can play along to it. And the person that is playing along with me is John Patitucci. He was playing 6-string electric bass on it.
That's crazy. One of my absolute musical heroes. Remember seeing him with Chick back, I think it was 1988, something like that, in Toronto with Weckl, of course. It was the electric band.
Yeah.
Goodness me, that was just frightening.
I've had the opportunity to play with him a few times, and he's just ridiculous. He's so great.
Upright or electric, it doesn't matter, absolutely.
And like I mentioned on this thing, he was playing 6-string electric bass, which is basically guitar. It was like way up in the upper. I think I don't know exactly how it's tuned, but it sure sounds like it's tuned similar to a guitar. Maybe an octave lower, I'm not sure.
You have certainly had your fair share of great bass players to play with, over the last, several decades, and I can't imagine what it would be like to play with someone like Will Lee or Patitucci. Did anybody ever give you any feedback, or were they kind of contemporaries and would never really need to say anything to you? Did any of the bass players ever give you suggestions or ideas? Because Patitucci had played with Vinny, and he played with Weckl and so many other people. Was there any feedback from them, or any tips or anything like that?
Nothing really specific that would be, hey, you don't do this, do something different. But sometimes, like musically, just creative ideas. I remember there was a gig that I was doing with my band that Will was on, fortunately. And actually, one of the songs that's on my new record, I'm All Yours, I was playing it on that gig with a guest singer, Tabitha Fair, who was going to come up and sing. So we were at the rehearsal studio running the song, and Will said, I don't want to, change anything that you're doing, but it's just a suggestion. But what do you think about playing this song like a lot slower? Because it's
Wow.
real pretty, and it could be, real sexy, and just get it like a real romantic kind of a feel. I said, great idea. Let's do it. He said, no, you don't have to just say it just because I'm saying it. So I think it's a marvelous idea. Let's do it. So I think there were suggestions like that from time to time, more so than don't play that or do something.
That's great. Yeah, just approach, maybe just different approaches and some idea. That's wonderful that he would be musical enough and humble enough to say, you don't have to take this idea. It's just something he thought of.
Will is my hero, and it is you mentioned anything about any aspect of music, bass playing or music, anything having to do with music, and he has perfected it. He's really fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Didn't his father he was the head of, was it Miami, the music department? And then they started the electric bass program in Miami back in sometime in the 70s. Yeah, Will's pretty crazy. So those of you who don't know, who is Will Lee? Can you give us an insight?
Willie is arguably or inarguably, I don't know what the word is, the most recorded bassist who ever walked the planet. I mean, I have a good discography, but his is like, absolutely incredible. I don't think there's anybody that you could mention that he has not played with. Before or after he was the bassist on the Letterman show, Late Night Letter, which he did he did it from day one to the last day. I don't know how many years was that, like 30, 35 years, somewhere in that vicinity, 40 years. I don't know. So not only did
Yeah.
used to playing like some, fast walking stuff. It's like, well, if Ron Carter can't be here now, this does it. He just figures out instantaneously what to play all the time.
And a Beatles nut, right? And loves the Beatles. And doesn't he play drums? I've seen.
Great drummer. There's a little story on one of the recordings from that Phil Woods era. One of the songs was mine, and Will just sat down at the drums, started playing a very cool beat, like on the hi-hat, kind of like the peg thing, but before that. And it was just so grooving, so I kind of incorporated it a little bit in the song on that thing. He plays really great guitar. He's a fabulous singer. He's sung on several of my song demos. And we've written pop songs together.
That's crazy. So, man, so what is your gig tonight? I feel bad for keeping you this long because I know you probably should be. Is it still happening even though the weather is terrible?
I don't know. I have to see if my sled is
Hey, it sounds like July here in Canada, eh? No.
It is a gig not too far from here, as I mentioned, about an hour from where I live, at a really nice venue with Mark Skanga, who's a fantastic guitarist and singer, leaning in the Brazilian groove. And it's always a pleasure playing with him. So any opportunity I can get to go out and, play music when people want to hear it, especially now, is a good one. So I hope to be able to make that.
Wonderful. We're going to wind down here, but I wanted to know what do you practice these days?
A lot of times I like to get behind the kit and that beat that I had sung that I tried to practice when I was 12 years old with da-dun, da-dun, da-dun on the kick and on the left foot on the hi-hat. I have a metronome behind the drums. I put on some headphones and I crank it to, I don't know, like 155, and then bump it up to 160, and then bump it up to like 165, and play that underneath, and then just play everything that I could possibly think of on top of it, like patterns with the cymbals, patterns around the drums. And then if there's something that I'm stuck with a little bit, I'll just repeat it and just try to get it together and let that happen for as long as I possibly can.
That's really cool.
Then I'll go back to, sight reading, not to let that go.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
It's lovely. I'm so grateful for the last couple of years in that way, where I've been able to actually practice and get together some things that I knew that I didn't have time to practice, and just advance. As Kenwood Denard says, just advance. You just want to get better at the instrument. So for that, I'm super grateful.
Kenwood
Last
Denard, tell you one little fast.
Yeah.
So this was 1979 or 1980. Ken would call me. We had known each other because when he was with Pat Martino, I was with my brother, and Pat and my brother did a lot of gigs, opening for just double billed, let's put it that way, together. So I became friendly with Kenwood. So one day in about 79 or 80, he called me and he said, I'm going out on the road with Manhattan Transfer, and I've been teaching at the Drummers Collective. Would you help me out and take over my students for 2 months? So I went up to his apartment in Harlem, and he took out a stack of books like this, and he just put them on my lap, and he said, here. I said, well, what do I do? Just do whatever you want. But this is and it show up in that start I did it. He said, just do
Where your mic's gone funky again.
just pay attention.
There we go.
Pay attention to what the needs are of the student. You can look at my material, you can do your stuff. So I showed up the next morning at 10 o'clock with the stack of books, and I ended up being at the Drummers Collective for like 4 years.
What a good school, boy. That was kind of, like the cat's ass, right? It really was.
And it was the beginning of it. It was actually on 42nd Street in Manhattan when it began. Wow,
wonderful. I'm friends with Peter Retzloff, who teaches from there, and Peter's Peter's a heavy drummer, really, really lovely guy. Whoa, what an experience! Yeah, Kenwood's pretty incredible,
Phenomenal.
And
I love that when he does the keyboard and playing thing.
Yeah, he's crazy, and he sounds so great on that Sting. He does. What's that song that he did on the Sting record? I'm trying to think if it's a Hendrix tune or that they covered. Nevertheless, and David Sanchez is on that as well. That's crazy. So last question for you: what one or two valuable things have you learned from your journey thus far that you could share with a young person that says, Terry, I want to do what you do. What do I need to do?
I just can only speak from my heart and just what I'm doing for myself at this point is, I played on these things and I did these things, but there's just a lot more that I want to do, that I need to do, that I should be doing. And so I'm going to continue doing that. My situation could be different than somebody else's. I have an interest in writing pop songs. I have an interest in writing whatever kind of songs a publisher wants me to write. Same thing with drumming. I played on the fusion-y stuff with my brother in the early days, but I wanted to move to New York to play on pop R&B records with the people that you mentioned. I wanted to do that. I wanted to get into that, to do different things. So my attitude is still the same, that like you said, well, what do you do when you get behind the kit? Well, I'll start out with that because, I want to like work up some energy, but, I'll go to the reading. I'll go to like some Latin stuff to try to get that together, whatever it is. And the same thing with writing, like I'm working on new material with other people by myself. So if you want to be a musician and you want to be a drummer and you want it to happen, you have to love it as much as I just described. It's just, I love it. I really want to be doing this. I don't have to do it. It's a calling, and I just really enjoy it. So no matter what's going on in the world and how difficult it is to make a living from it, and no matter how difficult it is to go out and do a gig, you make it happen. As I mentioned, I got this loft in the city and I called people. They didn't have to come up. Some didn't, some did. But the idea was to just immerse myself into it and to get it rolling. This very setup right now is, kind of like foreign to me, where to plug in the headphones, to turn the mic off. As we're talking, my mic is going out. Is the camera up there? But I wanted to like push it further in order to get something happening. So hopefully, I had a great time in the interview. For me, it was a great experience that I would never want it. I treasure it. Like I wanted this to happen. I wanted to be able to play a little bit. So just do it. Just go into whatever you have to do, but it's really hard work. Hard work, not that it's uncomfortable or not fun. That's not what I mean. Working, you really have to put in a lot of time. And then when you get the gigs and when you get things happening musically, then you're going to have fun because you're not going to be learning so much about the rudiments, the exercises. I know a lot of horn players and jazz players the scales, your rudiments, your scales at home, but when you get to the gig, you're a little bit behind. So it's really a combination of working very hard to get your act together, music technique, but you have to also find ways to make music. And I don't, what a drag it is. Musicians have to have those obstacles in front of them to anything happening, especially now with, the pandemic and it's hard to play live, find places, but you figure out a way to do it, even if it's here in a studio, whatever.
That's great, man. You've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your stories, and thank you for playing the tracks. And man, it's really great to meet you, and seriously, love to meet you in person sometime. We're not all that far apart, and I play New York State probably once or twice a year with the show I play with. So it'd be really fun to meet you in person and see where you're at, and if you're playing, it'd be fun.
It would be fantastic. So I'm going to trust that you're going to let me know when you're planning on being here so that we can set that up, because there's nothing more than I would love than to do that.
That'd be fun. Man,
and I thank you enough for having me here, for being, just so pleasant and great to be with, and being just a great musician. And it really is nice to be doing this with you under the umbrella of Gretsch drums, man. That's the best.
Yep, they certainly are. My pleasure. Everyone, you take care of yourselves. Enjoy your gig tonight if it is a go, and just definitely be safe to and from. So everyone, we will see you in 2 weeks, not next week. We will see you in 2 weeks for episode 71. Thank you so much, Terry. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all for tuning in, for your comments, everybody. Take care. We'll see you again.
Thank you, Neil. Bye.